not know the legend.
Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're covering the first Shrek spin-off movie, Puss in Boots.
Taking place long before Shrek, Puss in Boots led a life as a suave outlaw known across the fairytale world and beyond. However, when his old friend Humpty Dumpty wants to pull off one last job of capturing the Golden Goose.
Yes. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, notification for future podcasts and World of Pause videos. So, this came out now 14 years ago.
And this was the favorite until The Last Wish, and it just got knocked and tossed to the side.
Pretty much. Now it's like, oh, it's garbage now. The second one's the best. It's like, okay, you wouldn't have this one, even have the first one. It would just be on its own.
Absolutely.
So, he actually had seen this movie long time ago, I think around the time it was first out. And we actually ended up rewatching it many years later after seeing The Last Wish, just to sort of refresh our memories what happened with the first one. And you can tell it also looked pretty different from the new one. It actually looked the same animation as Shrek. And what people loved about the second one is that they threw out that style in favor of a more, I would say stylistic, but they really just did Spider-Verse animation, made them more, I guess, expressive, I guess. But I will say it was a great move to make sure you knew it was still in the Shrek universe by keeping that same style as the other movies.
Definitely. And it delivered on being the same high-quality entertainment as the Shrek movie. Sometimes you get a prequel or a spinoff, and it does poorly, and it's written badly.
Right.
Excuse me, and it doesn't follow the same formula. Well, they followed the exact same formula for this, and it worked brilliantly. And
absolutely.
I do remember seeing it the first time and being very, very impressed. And so were theater audiences, because they had a budget of $130 million and made $555 million at the box office.
Wow, so it tells you just how popular only the character was and the movie was too. And this ended up bringing up the question later on, like, what other characters can get spin-offs of Shrek? Really no one else. Puss in Boots was the only one that could probably hold up a movie, because I don't think people want to see a 90-minute donkey movie.
Unfortunately.
Or a Gingy movie.
Nothing against Eddie Murphy, but I think he works best with, the comedy team with Shrek.
Right.
With Mike Myers.
Right. Yeah, anyone else probably wouldn't be able to hold up a film. At the most, maybe a special or a short like they've done for Halloween or Christmas, where they have their own little short stories, their adventures separate from Shrek. That would work, but Puss in Boots really was the only character that could pull off a film, especially since he was well loved after the second Shrek movie.
And it had a full story going for it. It wasn't just a bunch of clips or a bunch of different adventures put together or an anthology.
Right.
It was a real story that
right.
had depth.
Yes.
And that was interesting. And it had all the elements, again, that made Shrek great were in the spinoff.
Right.
And that's why it worked.
Right. And you also get more backstory of Puss and how he ended up becoming Puss in Boots later on. And yes, they have to go for a slightly tragic backstory, but it's more like a portrayal backstory type thing here. And one of the things that was funny, two things. One, he was friends with an egg, of all things, I guess, since he was a misfit, so was Humpty. And then they were doing this little thing that I guess kids used to do when they would do like the Blood Brothers thing. They would prick the finger and they would shake the hands, and they say they were blood brothers doing that. And what was funny is that when Puss pricked his, it came out red. Humpty pricked his, and it was yellow. Like yolk was coming out of it. I'm like, who added that detail into this movie?
We can't have red come in this egg. That'll be too creepy. So.
Right. And they kept, as you said, the Fairytale formula intact of putting in these different creative twists on the stories. Well, they've already done their twist on Puss in Boots, so they got to add in Humpty Dumpty, Jack and Jill, and the Golden Goose / Beanstalk story. So that was what they ended up adding into here. And it's pretty interesting that they turned the goose into its own thing. They just left out the giant Jack, and it's like, oh, that already all happened, but no one got the goose, so they have to go after the goose. And these little stories they come up with for whatever they're hunting for is actually creative. Like, these are like fairy tale artifacts in a way, because they did the same thing in The Last Wish, getting the star, and they do the same thing in The Little Shore. They did with finding a trident that Neptune had. So I do like this sort of little running thing they have, where there's a fairy tale artifact someone's looking for and it holds great power or something.
Yeah. Now they have a fantastic voice cast. Antonio Banderas is Puss in Boots, of course.
Of course, yes.
Salma Hayek is Kitty Softpaws, both who returned in the
Last
sequel.
one, yes.
Zach Galifianakis
Yeah,
is
that's a
Humpty
hard
Dumpty.
one.
Billy Bob Thornton and Amy Sedaris is Jack and Jill.
Right.
Oh my gosh, and they were murderous outlaws.
Right, and not siblings anymore.
That's right. Constance Marie as Imelda, Mike Mitchell as Andy, or Jack Beanstalk.
Oh man.
Guillermo del Toro as Commandante.
Yes, a little cameo.
And Chris Miller as Little Boy Blue. So they
Right.
didn't have a huge cast, but the funny thing is, when you think about watching it, it seemed like there was a huge cast.
Yes, it
They
did.
had a lot of extra background characters, but they had a small cast, and it worked like a giant big production.
Yeah,
it just felt like it.
Right, absolutely, because the story was so well written. Both movies had that feel to it. So yes, you're right, absolutely. And one thing I can say a difference between this movie and the second one, besides the animation, is that there's also a change in Puss's character when you got to the sequel. The first one pretty much stuck with what he was in Shrek 2 onwards. And they still show him being the cool cat, the lady lover and all that. And they actually had some innuendo scenes in here that they had to get rid of in the second one, because they had to tame Puss down after all that, because they had some implications of him being around with the lady cats and the human women. They're like, okay, we can't do that anymore. When they got to The Last Wish, we just have to have him be with Kitty and leave it at that. They had to get rid of that. Almost like they almost punished them for putting that in the movie.
And I did miss it. I did miss him in that comedy, because that's what it was.
Right.
It was just comedic.
Right.
He was like a more intelligent Pepe Le Pew.
Right. And that was another big difference between these two movies, is that Puss was, he did have funny moments. He still could be goofy at times. But when you got to the second one, he was a lot more reckless. The first one, he lived for the danger, the adventure, wherever the wind blows and all that. And the second one, he just did whatever the heck he wanted. He was daredevil, reckless, put his life on line most of the time because he wanted that thrill, and he just didn't care what the heck happened to him. He was kind of dumb at certain points.
And that's how he lost 8 of his lives.
Right. So with this one, we kind of end up getting a refresher, like, okay, his character did change a little bit by the time we got to the second one. It didn't ruin the movie or anything, but you can tell, I guess they had to update some things, and those were the changes they made. But they weren't bad. They were just like, oh wow, he's a little different now because times have changed. Right, times have changed and everything.
He still has swashbuckling in him.
Right.
Adventures, but yeah, a lot of the things that would have been deemed incorrect or not appropriate or offensive, they took out.
Right.
But it still worked.
Right.
Now, this was the first DreamWorks animated film that was partly made in India.
Really?
A Bangalore studio owned by Technicolor, which had mainly worked on TV specials and DVD bonus material, spent 6 months animating 3 major scenes in the film. And it cost 40% less in labor than in the U.S. But they said the primary reason for outsourcing to India was lack of personnel due to the studio producing as many as 3 times a year.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, me either. With the production and everything. And I think this was also a risk for them to do, doing a spin-off of one character from a franchise, because sometimes that happens, and there are times where it does work, and sometimes it doesn't. But luckily for DreamWorks, it worked tremendously in their favor. And of course, keeping Antonio Banderas as Puss, because when they've changed him before when they've done a TV show and it just didn't sound right. You could tell it was someone just pretending to be him. They kept him as the role for both films, and I'm glad they really did that for this. And the biggest strength of the movie is the characters and the story. And I think that's why it really should be taken more highly. I don't think should be one that's thrown to the wayside just because the sequel did phenomenal things. I mean, sequel was fantastic. It did even more than the first one, granted. But it's like, for me, like Kung Fu Panda 2 and Shrek 2, it doesn't mean, oh, the first one is trash compared to it. This is superior now. It did it better because it tackled death and all that. No, if you didn't have this movie, you wouldn't get The Last Wish. You would just have a movie and no context with it whatsoever. So I think both movies are great and still really enjoy the first one. It's a little different seeing it now, especially with animation changing, so we know Shrek 5 is going to look different when it comes out. But I do like that they stuck to the formula that was working for this franchise and bet on the right horse and gave Puss in Boots his own little franchise that is now beloved by Shrek fans.
And another thing is, I don't know what it is with trying to change history, but it got accolades when it came out. It was getting ratings of A- and A+ from critics, and was nominated for quite a few awards. I won't mention them all, but the ones that it won for was Kid Choice Awards, Favorite Animated Movie, and Favorite Voice from Animated Movie Antonio Banderas. It won Best Animated Film from the Saturn Awards, and also won the Best Animated Females Women Film Critics Circle, but it was nominated for quite a few. So that's just a testament of how great this movie was when it came out. As you said, putting out a sequel does not negate the brilliance of the first movie.
Yeah.
And owning them both is just the smartest thing to do. So you can actually do a little movie night and watch one and then watch two.
Right.
I also love that they brought back both Banderas and Salma Hayek.
Right.
You knew they were going to bring back Banderas. It would have been like
Right.
bloody murder. Why?
Right.
If they didn't. But bringing her back was even better. Because unfortunately, a lot of times they like to get younger females
Right.
in roles, but they didn't. They brought her back, and they both were just as fantastic. And she had mellowed down some too. Her character, Kitty Softball.
Yes, that is true.
So if you've seen the original Puss in Boots 2011 movie, let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you still love it like we do? Or have you decided you've resigned to get rid of it and only like the sequel? Let us know what you think. If you haven't seen the original Puss in Boots, but you've seen the first one, you gotta go back and watch. I'm sorry, you've seen the second one. You've got to go back and watch the first one. You are missing out on what helped you make The Last Wish as great as it was.
Right.
And you owe yourself that much to watch it.
Yes. And if you haven't already, subscribe for updates and weekly videos of favorite anime series, anime shows, and all things animation.
Absolutely. And you get to hear Antonio Banderas do Puss in Boots as he was the same type of role character in Shrek before The Last Wish.
Right.
You're never going to see that again, even when the new Shrek 5 comes out.
Yeah.
He's not going to be like he was in 2011 Puss in Boots.
Right.
So go ahead and watch it if you haven't seen it. Get that fun out of your system and enjoy it as much as everyone enjoyed it.
Yes.
And it deserves to continue having accolades for the greatness that it brought to DreamWorks and to audiences.
Yes. So, thank you so much for watching Mask Entertainment.
And at Mom Entertainment, thank you for joining us and supporting us. We really appreciate you so much.
Have a toontastic day.
Peace.